Apparently, community safety now means breaking into my cabin and changing the locks while I'm gone. Neat. I guess the new HOA president thinks she's starring in a true crime podcast called How to Get Sued in 10 Easy Steps. First she fined me for non-regulation deck furniture, then for too many pine cones. Next thing I know, she's strutting around with a clipboard like she's auditioning for CSI landscaping unit. The final straw? A note taped to my door. We've upgraded your lock for your protection. For my protection? Sure, stick around. This story has fire, lies, sabotage, and the most satisfying downfall since Tiger King. Comment below if you've survived a petty neighbor war, or just love a good HOA meltdown. My name is Devin Collins, and until recently, my life at Pine Lake Resort in Montana had been exactly what I'd dreamed of. After spending years designing cookie-cutter buildings for a major construction firm in Seattle, I'd finally broken free to pursue my passion, designing eco-friendly cabins that harmonized with nature rather than imposing upon it. Pine Lake Resort had been the perfect place to build my showcase cabin, which doubled as both my home and portfolio. The community was a collection of upscale cabins nestled around a pristine lake, surrounded by mountains that seemed to guard us from the outside world. Neighbors were friendly but respectful of privacy, and the Homeowners Association had reasonable rules that preserved the area's natural beauty without becoming overbearing. At least, that was the situation until Brenda Whitfield won the HOA presidency 3 months ago, with her campaign promising to protect resort values and preserve our natural environment. I can still remember her victory speech, delivered on a makeshift podium near the community dock, her bleach blonde hair messily piled on her head, wearing a gaudy floral blouse that clashed horribly with her faded jeans and excessive makeup. "We need to ensure Pine Lake remains the premium destination it was meant to be," she'd declared, her voice carrying across the water. "And that means enforcing standards to protect all our investments." The first HOA meeting under Brenda's leadership should have been my warning. She introduced a binder, yes, a physical 3-ring binder of updated safety regulations that seemed specifically designed to give her unlimited access to everyone's property. "These new fire safety measures are non-negotiable," she'd announced, flipping through pages of arbitrary rules about exterior paint colors, ladder placements, and mandatory inspections. "The recent wildfires in California have taught us we can't be too careful." Nobody mentioned that Montana's climate was entirely different, or that we already had sensible fire regulations in place. I kept quiet, hoping to avoid attracting attention, but throughout the meeting I noticed Brenda's eyes repeatedly shifting to me, narrowing slightly each time, as though she was cataloging something about me she didn't like. As the meeting wrapped up, I overheard Walter Bennett, the former HOA president, a kind, silver-haired man in his 60s who still attended meetings, muttering to another resident, "This isn't about safety. Watch what happens next." What happened next was a cabin on Pinecone Road being flagged for significant code violations. The owner, a retired school teacher named Margaret, was suddenly facing thousands of dollars in fines. Within 2 weeks, a "sold" sign appeared in her yard. The following day, I saw Brenda walking along the perimeter of my property during her afternoon inspection rounds, her phone out, taking photos of my electrical system and exterior lighting. My cabin was my masterpiece. A modern interpretation of traditional mountain architecture, with sustainable features integrated throughout. Its unique angular roofline and expansive windows were designed to maximize solar gain while framing perfect views of the mountains. Apparently, its uniqueness had put a target on my back. The first violation notice arrived the next day, a ridiculous claim that my exterior paint color, which had been approved 2 years earlier, was half a shade too dark, according to the new regulations. The fine was only $75, but the principle enraged me. I paid it while planning my next move. That night, I received my first visitor in weeks. Walter Bennett knocked on my door just as the sun was setting. "I saw Brenda circling your place earlier," he said without preamble when I invited him in. "You need to be careful, Devin. The cabin next to yours that burned down? That wasn't an accident. I don't have proof, but this isn't the first time something like this has happened since she took over." He glanced nervously over his shoulder before continuing. "She's targeting you next. I can feel it." As Walter was leaving, my phone pinged with an email notification from the HOA. Mandatory fire safety inspection. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I showed it to Walter, whose face darkened. "Don't let them in," he warned. "Whatever you do, check your locks. Carefully." As he walked away, I noticed a figure watching from between the trees. Brenda, her pale blonde hair catching the last light of day, phone raised as though taking photos. When our eyes met, She didn't even pretend to be doing anything else. She just smiled and walked away, leaving me with a distinct chill despite the warm evening. The morning after receiving the mandatory inspection notice, I skipped my usual design work and dove into research about HOA legal rights in Montana. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. Brenda was dramatically overstepping her authority. HOAs could enforce aesthetic regulations and common area maintenance, but they couldn't conduct interior inspections without either homeowner consent or evidence of an imminent danger. I immediately responded to the email, politely but firmly declining the inspection and citing the relevant state laws and our own HOA bylaws. Then I called Harper Mitchell, a neighboring cabin owner who I knew worked as a prosecutor in the county district attorney's office. "Devin, I've been wondering when you'd call," she said when I explained the situation. "Brenda's been stepping on toes all over the resort. Several homeowners have mentioned similar concerns to me. I've actually been quietly gathering information about her activities. Something doesn't add up about her sudden interest in this community." Harper promised to look into Brenda's background discreetly, but warned me to be careful. "Document everything," she advised. "Don't give her any legitimate reason to come after you, and consider installing security cameras if you haven't already." Little did she know I was already ordering a comprehensive security system online as we spoke. By that afternoon, I received another violation notice, this time claiming my deck railing was 2 inches shorter than the new minimum safety height and demanding a $500 fine. The escalation was blatant, especially when the railings had been built to code and inspected just 2 years earlier. Rather than paying immediately, I decided to contest this one formally at the next HOA meeting and spent the evening drafting a detailed response with photos and the original building permits attached. As I was finishing up, Walter texted me, "Check your email. Emergency HOA meeting tomorrow at noon. Important vote." The emergency meeting was clearly timed when most residents would be at work. Only 11 people showed up, 8 of whom appeared to be personal friends of Brenda's. People I'd never seen at meetings before. The agenda contained one item: vote on updated surveillance device regulations. Brenda stood at the front, her gaudy floral top somehow even brighter than usual, as she presented a new bylaw prohibiting unauthorized surveillance equipment on any property within the resort. "We've had reports of invasive cameras monitoring common areas and neighboring properties," she announced, giving me a pointed look. "This is a privacy issue that must be addressed immediately." The measure passed 7-4, with the only opposition coming from Walter, Harper, myself, and one other homeowner. As the small crowd dispersed, Brenda approached me directly, her heavily made-up face inches from mine. "I know what you're planning, Collins," she whispered. "This community has standards. If you can't meet them, perhaps it's time to sell." I stood my ground, forcing a polite smile. "I appreciate your concern for the community, Brenda. I share it. That's why I'll be documenting everything that happens around my property from now on." That evening, I installed my new security system, a comprehensive network of hidden cameras covering every approach to my cabin with motion sensors at all entry points. The system included thermal detection and break-in alerts, all connected to cloud storage that would automatically send footage to my phone in real time. I made sure one camera was visible near my front door, a decoy to satisfy Brenda if she went looking for cameras to complain about. The rest were carefully concealed in bird feeders, landscape lighting, and architectural features of the cabin. As I worked, I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, jumping at every cracking twig in the surrounding forest. My hands trembled slightly as I connected the final wires, a physical manifestation of the anxiety that had been building since Walter's warning. This cabin was more than my home. It was my design showcase, my future, my sanctuary. The thought of someone deliberately targeting it made my stomach knot with both fear and anger. The next day, my security system sent its first alert. Motion detected at the southeast corner of the property. The footage showed Brenda and 2 other HOA board members walking around my cabin while I was getting coffee in town. I watched in real time on my phone as they examined my windows, took photos of my electrical box, and lingered by my front door. When I returned home, I carefully inspected my door and found what I was looking for. Small scratch marks around the lock, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for them. Someone had tried to test my lock, albeit inexpertly. Just as I was processing this discovery, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Be careful. Barrett's cabin burned after his lock was changed. Check your locks immediately." I froze, thinking of the cabin that had burned down 2 weeks earlier. Barrett had been an engineer who lived there part-time, and the fire had been attributed to an electrical fault. Now I wasn't so sure. That night, I barely slept, watching the security feed on my tablet until my eyes burned from exhaustion. Every shadow made me tense. Every distant sound had me reaching for my phone to check the cameras. The sanctuary I'd built for myself now felt like a fortress under siege. The next morning, I visited Harper's cabin for legal advice. Her place was smaller than mine, but elegantly designed, with a wall of law books betraying her profession. "They're escalating faster than I expected," she said after I showed her the security footage and the marks on my lock. "I think you need to understand what you're dealing with." I did some digging on Brenda Whitfield. Harper pulled out a folder and spread several documents across her kitchen table. She used to work for Pinnacle Development Group, a company that's been trying to buy up lakefront property all through this region. They want to tear down the individual cabins and build a massive resort complex. My blood ran cold as the pieces clicked into place. So she's deliberately making life difficult for homeowners to force them to sell. Harper nodded grimly, picking up another paper. And there's more. Before coming here, she lived in a similar community in Oregon. 3 suspicious fires in 2 years, all properties that refused to sell to developers. Nothing was ever proven, but she didn't need to finish the sentence. "What should I do?" I asked. "Call the sheriff?" Harper shook her head. "Not yet. We need solid proof. Keep recording everything, and be extremely careful. Don't leave your cabin unattended if you can help it." Following Harper's advice, I reinforced my security system, adding even more cameras and focusing especially on my door locks and windows. I installed tiny hidden cameras near each lock, programmed to send immediate alerts at any sign of tampering. The system was connected to a backup power supply that would keep running even if the main electricity was cut. I felt like I was preparing for war rather than living in what was supposed to be a peaceful mountain retreat. My work suffered as I found myself constantly checking the security feeds on my phone, jumping at every notification. Each night, I lay awake, replaying Walter's warnings in my mind, imagining flames engulfing my beautiful cabin while I slept. The dark circles under my eyes grew deeper, but my resolve only strengthened. If Brenda wanted a fight, she would get one. Just not the kind she was expecting. I wouldn't confront her directly, I would let her incriminate herself. Every move she made near my property was now being meticulously documented, every conversation recorded when legally permissible. The inevitable confrontation came sooner than expected. 3 days after installing my enhanced security system, I received an official HOA violation notice regarding my unauthorized surveillance equipment, citing the newly passed regulation. The letter demanded I remove all cameras within 48 hours or face a fine of $1,000, followed by daily penalties. Rather than fight this directly, I decided on a different approach. I visibly removed the decoy camera I had intentionally placed in an obvious location, making sure to do it during daylight hours when Brenda's inspection walks typically occurred. Sure enough, my security feed captured her watching from a distance, a satisfied smile spreading across her heavily made-up face. What she didn't know was that I had replaced the visible camera with an even more sophisticated hidden one, and the rest of my security network remained intact, now programmed to automatically forward any break-in footage to Sheriff Lucas Reed's email. Walter had introduced me to the sheriff at a community barbecue the previous summer, a no-nonsense man in his 50s who had expressed frustration with what he called HOA power trips across the county. That evening, Walter stopped by again, this time with more concrete information. "I've been talking to other homeowners who've left Pine Lake recently," he said, his voice low despite us being inside my cabin. "The pattern is always the same. Brenda finds some violation, harassment escalates, and then something happens. Vandalism, mysterious damage, or, in 3 cases now, fires." He ran a hand through his silver hair, looking genuinely frightened, and before each fire, the homeowners reported something odd about their locks or doors. I showed Walter my enhanced security system and the precautions I'd taken. He nodded approvingly, but still looked worried. "Just be careful. I think she's working with someone. I've seen her meeting with a man I don't recognize. Tall guy, expensive suit. They meet at the resort boundary, always staying in his car." This new information sent another chill through me. If Brenda was working for developers, how far would they go to get what they wanted? That night, I programmed my system to recognize and alert me if anyone approached within 20 feet of any door or window, and double-check that all footage was being backed up to multiple secure cloud locations. The next morning, I received a call from a client who wanted to review designs for a new eco-cabin project about an hour's drive away. I hesitated, reluctant to leave my home unattended. But this was an important client who was paying a substantial deposit. The meeting couldn't be rescheduled. Before leaving, I did a complete check of my security system, ensuring everything was functioning perfectly. I paid special attention to the lock, monitoring cameras, which were sensitive enough to detect even slight movements or changes in pressure. As I was getting into my truck, my security app alerted me to movement near the tree line. Brenda was watching from a distance, phone in hand. Our eyes met briefly before I drove off, and the triumphant look on her face made my stomach clench. She thought she'd finally caught me away from home. Throughout my client meeting, I found myself constantly checking my phone, half expecting to see alert notifications. The meeting ran longer than anticipated, stretching into the afternoon as we discussed sustainable materials and solar orientation. Just as we were wrapping up, my phone exploded with alerts. Motion detected at front door. Lock tampering detected. Unknown individuals on property. I excused myself and rushed to a quiet corner to check the footage. The video was crystal clear. Brenda and a locksmith were at my front door. The homeowner requested an emergency lock change due to safety concerns, Brenda was saying, her voice perfectly captured by the hidden microphone. He's stuck at a meeting but asked us to proceed immediately. The locksmith looked somewhat dubious, but proceeded to remove my front door lock while Brenda supervised. My system was sending the footage not only to me but also to Sheriff Reed, as programmed. My hands trembled with a mixture of anger and vindication as I watched them complete the lock change and Brenda affix a note to my door. I zoomed in on the note. Fire safety inspection completed per HOA regulations. Contact office for new key. Without missing a beat, I called Sheriff Reed. "Sheriff, are you seeing this?" I asked when he answered. "I am," he replied, his voice serious. "Mrs. Whitfield appears to be engaging in illegal entry. Where are you now?" "About 30 minutes away," I told him. "I'm heading back immediately." "Good," he said. "Don't confront her alone. I'm on my way there now. And Devin, don't tell her about the cameras. Let her think she's got the upper hand for now." I broke every speed limit getting back to Pine Lake, my mind racing with possibilities. What had Brenda done inside my cabin? Had she planted something? Damaged my work? Set up some kind of fire trap? The 40-minute drive took me just under 30, and as I pulled into my driveway, I saw exactly what I expected. Brenda standing on my porch, waiting, a set of keys dangling from her fingers. Her blonde hair was practically glowing in the late afternoon sunlight, her garish outfit making her look even more out of place against the natural wood tones of my cabin. Her smile was the embodiment of smug satisfaction as I approached. "Devin, you're back earlier than expected," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We had to conduct an emergency inspection due to reports of potential fire hazard. I'm afraid we found several serious safety violations that need to be addressed immediately." I kept my face neutral, though my hands were clenched so tightly I could feel my nails digging into my palms. "Is that right?" I replied calmly. "And changing my locks was necessary for this inspection?" Brenda's smile didn't falter. "Standard procedure when serious violations are discovered. We couldn't risk having the property remain accessible without remediation." Just as she was about to continue, a police cruiser pulled up behind my truck. Sheriff Reed stepped out, adjusting his hat as he approached us. My phone buzzed with a text. "Don't mention the cameras." It was from the sheriff himself. Sheriff Reed approached with measured steps, his expression professionally neutral as he greeted us. "Afternoon, Mr. Collins. Miss Whitfield." Brenda's confident smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Sheriff, what brings you out to Pine Lake today?" The false sweetness in her voice was almost nauseating. Reed removed his sunglasses, his weathered face revealing nothing. "Got a report about a potential illegal entry. Thought I'd check it out personally." Brenda composed herself. "There must be some misunderstanding. As HOA president, I was conducting a mandatory safety inspection as outlined in our bylaws. Mr. Collins was informed in advance." She held up the keys to my cabin with an air of authority. "We had to replace the locks after discovering several critical safety violations. Standard procedure." I remained silent, watching the performance unfold exactly as the sheriff had instructed via text. Reed nodded thoughtfully, then pulled out a tablet from his cruiser. "Mind if I ask what specific violations you found, Ms. Whitfield?" Brenda launched into an elaborate explanation about improper wiring, blocked exits, and flammable materials stored incorrectly, all completely fabricated. As she spoke, I noticed her tote bag seemed unusually full, with a small stain on her gaudy floral blouse that looked fresh. "That sounds serious indeed," Sheriff Reed said when she finished. "Would you mind showing me these violations? Since I'm here, I should probably document them for the county safety office." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Brenda's face. "Well, I've already documented everything for HOA records. I'm not sure we need to duplicate efforts." "It won't take long," Reed insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument, "and since you have the new keys, you can let us in." As she unlocked my door with the new key, I felt a surge of anger, seeing someone else opening my home without permission. We stepped inside, and I immediately began scanning for anything out of place. My living room appeared untouched, but as we moved toward the kitchen, I noticed something alarming. Small objects placed near electrical outlets that hadn't been there before, including what looked like a container of flammable liquid partially hidden behind my toaster. Sheriff Reed saw it too, though his expression remained neutral. "Ms. Whitfield, did you move anything during your inspection?" Brenda shook her head emphatically. "Absolutely not. We only observed and documented." The sheriff nodded, then suddenly turned his tablet toward her. "That's interesting, because I have video showing you and a locksmith entering this property without the owner's permission about 2 hours ago." The color drained from Brenda's face as she watched footage from my security camera playing on the sheriff's tablet. That's not," she stammered. "You can't. That's illegal surveillance." Reed continued scrolling through the footage. "Actually, Mr. Collins has every right to monitor his own property. What's illegal is breaking and entering, Miss Whitfield." Her eyes darted between us, realization dawning that she'd been caught. "This is ridiculous. The HOA bylaws clearly state that we can inspect properties for safety violations. With proper notice and homeowner consent," Reed corrected her, "neither of which you had, but more concerning is what you did after entering." He swiped to another video clip, showing Brenda rummaging through my design files and placing several small objects around my kitchen, including the container now sitting suspiciously close to exposed wiring. Brenda's face contorted with rage and panic. "That video has been doctored. This is a setup." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the rest of the board right now." As she frantically dialed, Sheriff Reed calmly said, "I'll wait. In the meantime, I'm curious about what's in that container you placed behind the toaster." Brenda ignored him, speaking rapidly into her phone, summoning HOA board members to come witness what she called harassment and interference with HOA business. Within minutes, several cars began pulling up outside my cabin, and a small crowd gathered on my porch. Brenda's confidence seemed to return with the arrival of her supporters. "See, the board stands with me on this matter," she declared triumphantly as 5 people crowded into my living room. Sheriff Reed remained unperturbed. Perfect timing. Now everyone can see the evidence at once. I retrieved my laptop, connecting it to the large television screen in my living room. "I think we should all review exactly what happened today," I said, pulling up the security footage. The room fell silent as the videos played. Crystal clear footage showing Brenda directing the locksmith to change my locks under false pretenses, then entering my home, searching through my personal belongings, and finally, the most damning evidence, Brenda carefully placing what appeared to be accelerants near electrical outlets and heat sources throughout my cabin. One of the board members gasped audibly, "Brenda, what the hell?" Another stepped back, physically distancing himself from her. Brenda's face flushed red beneath her makeup. This isn't the footage is fake," she sputtered. "He's trying to frame me because he doesn't want to comply with safety regulations." Sheriff Reed had been quietly examining the container behind my toaster while everyone watched the videos. Now he held it up carefully by its edges. "This appears to be camping fuel, highly flammable, and there's what looks like a timed ignition device in your bag, Ms. Whitfield." He reached for her tote bag, which she clutched protectively to her chest. "You have no right to search my personal belongings," she shrieked. "Actually, I have probable cause," Reed replied calmly, "and this is evidence in what appears to be attempted arson." The mood in the room shifted dramatically. The board members who had arrived to support Brenda now stared at her in horror. Walter and Harper had also arrived, standing in the doorway with expressions that mixed shock and vindication. Sheriff Reed read Brenda her rights as he confiscated her bag, revealing not only the ignition device but several other items taken from my home. As he handcuffed her, Brenda's composure finally shattered. "You idiots! You have no idea what you're dealing with. I've already set up insurance for this situation." The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the dark cloud that had hung over Pine Lake Resort for months. News of Brenda's arrest spread quickly through the community, and by noon my phone was buzzing constantly with messages from neighbors expressing shock, support, and in some cases sharing their own stories of harassment. Walter organized an emergency community meeting at the Lakeside Pavilion, and nearly every homeowner attended, the largest turnout I'd seen since moving to Pine Lake. The mood was a mixture of outrage and relief as Walter stood before the gathered crowd, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering, "yesterday's events have revealed a troubling situation within our community. Brenda Whitfield has been arrested on charges of breaking and entering, attempted arson, and fraud. But this goes beyond one person's actions." Walter then explained what Harper and I had discovered about Brenda's connections to Pinnacle Development Group and their attempts to acquire the entire resort property for a massive commercial development. As Walter spoke, I scanned the crowd, noting the reactions. Most seemed genuinely shocked, but I noticed a few individuals who appeared uncomfortable rather than surprised, particularly Thomas Reeves and Patricia Donovan, two board members who had been Brenda's strongest supporters. They avoided eye contact with me, whispering to each other throughout Walter's presentation. When the floor opened for discussion, the community's response was overwhelming. One by one, homeowners stood to share their experiences: violation notices for imaginary infractions, escalating fines, pressure to sell their properties. Margaret, the retired teacher who had sold her cabin after the first round of violations, had returned for the meeting and revealed that she'd been told her property had serious structural issues that would cost tens of thousands to repair, issues that mysteriously disappeared when the new buyer, a shell company, we now realized, purchased it. The pattern was undeniable, and the community's anger palpable. By the meeting's end, Walter had been unanimously elected interim HOA president, and a committee was formed to review and revise all the regulations Brenda had implemented. As the meeting dispersed, Harper pulled me aside, her expression serious. "This isn't over, Devin," she said quietly. "Brenda might be in custody, but Pinnacle isn't going to give up easily. They've invested too much in this scheme." She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Sheriff Reed found something interesting when they searched Brenda's cabin: multiple sets of duplicate keys to various properties around the resort, and documentation about fire investigation procedures, specifically how investigators determine causes. My blood ran cold as I processed this information. "You think she was deliberately setting fires that would look like accidents?" Harper nodded grimly. "And I don't think she was working alone. Some of these operations would have required multiple people." Her words confirmed my suspicions about Thomas and Patricia's reactions during the meeting. "What should we do?" I asked. Harper's expression was determined. "Keep your security system active, document everything, and maybe consider sharing your setup with other homeowners who might be at risk." That afternoon, I found myself doing exactly that, helping Walter install a simplified version of my security system at his cabin. As we worked, I explained how my architecture background had influenced my approach to home security. "It's about designing layers of protection," I told him as we positioned motion sensors, "just like a well-designed building protects against the elements from multiple angles." Walter listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about camera placements and alert systems. "You know," he said as we finished the installation, "you could help a lot of people here with this knowledge. After everything that's happened, security is on everyone's mind." His suggestion resonated with me. Perhaps some good could come from this nightmare after all. By evening, I had 3 more requests from neighbors wanting security consultations, and I found myself sketching plans for simple but effective systems that could be implemented across the resort. As night fell, I returned to my cabin, emotionally and physically exhausted, but feeling more hopeful than I had in weeks. The community was coming together, and Brenda's scheme had been exposed before she could cause more damage. I was pouring myself a much-needed drink when my security system pinged. Movement detected at the perimeter of my property. The footage showed Thomas Reeves skulking along my tree line, clearly trying to stay hidden from view. I watched, heart pounding, as he made his way toward my utility connections at the side of the cabin. Without hesitation, I called Sheriff Reed, who promised to send a deputy immediately. Then I activated the cabin's external floodlights, illuminating the entire property with brilliant white light. Through my window, I saw Thomas freeze like a deer in headlights, then bolt toward the forest. By the time the deputy arrived, Thomas was gone, but the security footage clearly showed his attempted approach. The next morning, another emergency community meeting was called. This time, Harper took the lead, presenting evidence that suggested Thomas and Patricia had been working with Brenda all along. We've confirmed that both Thomas and Patricia received large payments from shell companies linked to Pinnacle Development, she announced, displaying bank records on a projector screen. And both have disappeared overnight, taking their belongings with them. A murmur ran through the crowd as this news sank in. The betrayal cut deep. These were people who had served on community committees, attended neighborhood barbecues, and all the while had been working to undermine the very community they pretended to serve. Walter stood up, his expression solemn. I propose we establish a community security committee immediately. With Devon's expertise, we can protect our homes and each other from further attempts at sabotage. The vote was unanimous, and just like that, I found myself heading a new committee focused on implementing resort-wide security measures. It wasn't the architectural project I'd imagined when moving to Pine Lake, but designing systems to protect people's homes felt surprisingly fulfilling. 1 week after Brenda's arrest, I received a call from Sheriff Reed, asking me to come to the station. When I arrived, I found him waiting with Harper in a small conference room, both wearing expressions that immediately set me on edge. We've made some disturbing discoveries, Reed began without preamble, after executing search warrants on Brenda's property and financial records. We've uncovered evidence that connects her to 3 cabin fires in different communities over the past 2 years. All followed the same pattern: HOA harassment, lock changes, and fires that appeared to be caused by electrical faults. He pushed a folder across the table toward me with photographs of burned structures, insurance reports, and a checklist titled Property Acquisition Protocol that outlined the exact steps Brenda had been following at Pine Lake. It's meticulous, Harper added, her professional prosecutor demeanor firmly in place. Identify targets, create violations, escalate pressure, arrange accidents, force sales at reduced prices. Pinnacle Development Group has been buying up resort properties across 3 states using this exact playbook. The methodical nature of the scheme was chilling. These weren't impulsive acts of malice. They were calculated steps in a corporate strategy that viewed people's homes and potentially their lives as acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of profit. What happens now? I asked. Brenda is facing multiple felony charges, Harper explained. Breaking and entering, attempted arson, conspiracy, fraud. She's looking at serious prison time. We've also opened investigations into Thomas Reeves and Patricia Donovan, though they've left the state. As for Pinnacle, she exchanged glances with Sheriff Reed. That's more complicated. Their executives are denying any knowledge of illegal activities, claiming Brenda and the others were overzealous independent contractors who exceeded their authority. The corporate shield, plausible deniability built into the system, with expendable middle managers taking the fall when things went wrong. So they just walk away? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Harper's expression hardened. Not if I have anything to say about it. I've already contacted the state attorney general's office. This crosses county lines, possibly state lines. That makes it a much bigger case. When I returned to Pine Lake that afternoon, the community had transformed. Neighbors who had barely spoken were now chatting in driveways and checking on each other. The atmosphere of suspicion had been replaced by a sense of shared purpose. I found Walter coordinating volunteers who were conducting a community-wide security assessment. For several hours, I helped neighbors, using my knowledge of building systems to identify potential safety issues. As the sun began to set, Walter and I took a break at the community dock, watching the light play across the lake's surface. You know, he said thoughtfully, in a strange way, Brenda might have done us a favor. I looked at him questioningly, and he continued, This community was beautiful before, but somewhat disconnected. Everyone kept to themselves. Now look around. He gestured to cabins visible along the shoreline, where people were gathering on decks, sharing meals, checking on neighbors. We've become an actual community. That evening I found a small group waiting on my porch. Harper, Sheriff Reed, and a man in an expensive suit. This is Richard Carlisle, legal counsel for Pinnacle Development Group, Harper explained. Mr. Collins, Carlisle began, his voice smooth and practiced. I wanted to personally express Pinnacle's shock and dismay at the actions of Brenda Whitfield. We had no knowledge of her illegal activities and have been fully cooperating with the authorities. I remained silent, studying him. Pinnacle would like to make this right, he continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. We're prepared to offer compensation to affected homeowners, including yourself, for any distress caused by Ms. Whitfield's actions. Harper's expression warned me to be careful. And in exchange? I asked, cutting to the chase. Carlyle's professional smile didn't waver. We simply ask that you sign this confidentiality agreement regarding the situation. Standard procedure in these matters. I didn't even need to look at the document to know what it contained. A legal gag order in exchange for a payoff. Mr. Carlyle, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I'm not interested in Pinnacle's money or signing anything that prevents me from speaking the truth. His smile tightened. Mr. Collins, I strongly encourage you to reconsider. This offer is quite generous, and the alternative could be less pleasant for all involved. Before I could respond, Sheriff Reed stepped forward. Mr. Carlyle, that sounded remarkably like a threat to a witness in an ongoing investigation. Would you care to clarify? The lawyer backpedaled immediately. Not at all, Sheriff. I'm simply pointing out that protracted legal proceedings benefit no one. Pinnacle prefers amicable resolutions. Harper chose that moment to interject. Speaking of legal proceedings, Mr. Carlyle, I received an interesting call from the State Attorney General today. They're quite interested in Pinnacle's business practices across multiple counties. Carlyle's composure slipped momentarily before he recovered. Pinnacle has nothing to hide. We'll cooperate fully, of course. He departed, walking briskly to a luxury sedan parked at the resort entrance, the same car I'd spotted the day of Brenda's arrest. 3 weeks after Brenda's arrest, Pine Lake Resort had transformed. The community that had once been a collection of individual cabins, each isolated in their own bubble of privacy, had become an interconnected neighborhood where people actively looked out for one another. The security committee I headed had implemented resort-wide measures, a shared alert system, regular patrols, and a community emergency response plan. My architectural skills had found an unexpected new outlet as I helped redesign common areas for better visibility and safety, all while preserving the natural beauty that made Pine Lake special. Today marked another milestone. Walter had called a special HOA meeting to formally adopt a new set of bylaws, drafted with input from every homeowner. The lakeside pavilion was packed as Walter took the podium, the afternoon sun creating a halo around his silver hair. Friends and neighbors, he began, today we reclaim our community. The bylaws we're voting on today ensure transparency, protect homeowner rights, and prevent the kind of abuses we experienced under previous leadership. The vote was unanimous, and the celebration that followed felt like a community being reborn. As people mingled around tables, laden with potluck offerings, I found myself drawn into conversation after conversation with neighbors who had previously been strangers. Margaret, the retired teacher who had been forced to sell her cabin, shared exciting news. With Harper's legal assistance, she was challenging the sale based on the fraud and coercion involved. If all goes well, I might be your neighbor again by Christmas, she told me, her eyes bright with hope. Throughout the afternoon, I heard similar stories of resilience and recovery. The community's wounds were healing, transformed into something stronger than before. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the lake, Harper found me at the edge of the gathering. You've become quite the community leader, she observed, handing me a glass of wine. I laughed, somewhat embarrassed by the observation. I'm just doing what needs to be done, same as everyone else. Harper shook her head. Not everyone would have had the foresight to install security systems that caught a criminal in the act. Not everyone would have stayed to help rebuild after going through what you did. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset reflect on the lake's surface. Have you heard the latest on Brenda? Harper asked eventually. I shook my head, and she continued. She's trying to cut a deal, offering information on Pinnacle's operations in exchange for reduced charges. This didn't surprise me. Brenda had struck me as the type to save herself at others' expense. Will it work? I asked. Harper shrugged. Partially. She'll still serve time, but her cooperation is valuable for the larger case against Pinnacle. The Attorney General's office has expanded their investigation to 5 states now. The news was satisfying. Corporate accountability was rare enough that each instance felt like a victory. As twilight deepened around us, the community gathering showed no signs of dispersing. Lights came on around the pavilion, and someone started a bonfire at the lake's edge. That night, returning to my cabin, I felt a peace that had been absent for months. My home was mine again, not a fortress under siege, but a sanctuary as I'd originally designed it to be. I poured myself a nightcap and settled into my favorite chair by the large windows overlooking the lake, where the bonfire was still visible in the distance. My security system tablet sat on the side table, screens showing the calm, empty surroundings of my property. Out of habit, I still checked it, but the anxious vigilance had faded. As I was about to turn in for the night, a final check of the system revealed something unexpected, a blinking light indicating a foreign signal detection. Following the alert, I systematically checked my cabin until I found the source, a tiny transmitter cleverly hidden in my electrical panel, designed to blend in with the existing components. The discovery sent a chill through me despite the warm evening. This wasn't amateur work like Brenda's lock tampering. This was professional surveillance equipment. I photographed everything in place, then carefully removed the device without damaging it. A call to Sheriff Reed brought him to my cabin within the hour, evidence bags in hand. "This is military grade," he said after examining the device, "not something Brenda would have access to or know how to install." He looked up at me, his expression grave. Pinnacle has bigger resources than we thought. The implications were disturbing. How many other cabins might be similarly bugged? How long had they been monitoring residents? Reed promised to bring in specialists to sweep the entire resort and to fast-track the device for forensic analysis. As he left, he paused at the door. "Devin, be careful. Corporations like Pinnacle don't give up easily when millions are at stake. They've just lost their inside operators, but that doesn't mean they're done." The next morning, I called an emergency meeting of the security committee to share what I'd found. The response was immediate and unified. A resort-wide sweep for surveillance devices would begin immediately, and our own security measures would be enhanced. As we dispersed to begin the work, Walter pulled me aside. "We need to think bigger," he said, his eyes alight with determination. "If Pinnacle wanted this land badly enough to resort to criminal tactics, others will too. This location is too valuable." He gestured toward the pristine lake and surrounding mountains. "We need a permanent solution that protects Pine Lake from developers for good." His words sparked an idea, something I'd read about other communities doing when faced with similar pressures. "What about a conservation easement?" I suggested. "We could partner with a land trust to legally protect the natural areas around our properties. It would prevent future development regardless of who owns individual cabins." Walter's face broke into a broad smile. "Exactly what I was thinking. And with your design background, you could help plan sustainable community spaces that enhance rather than detract from the natural environment." The idea took root quickly, spreading through the community with the same energy that had fueled our security initiatives. Within days, we had formed a conservation committee and begun discussions with a regional land trust. The project gave me a renewed sense of purpose, designing spaces that would preserve Pine Lake's natural beauty while enhancing the community connections that had formed through adversity. As I worked on preliminary sketches for a community center, my security system alerted me to a vehicle at the resort entrance, a luxury SUV with corporate logos I didn't recognize. A quick check of public records revealed it belonged to Evergreen Capital Partners, a firm known for acquiring and developing resort properties throughout the Northwest. The cycle was beginning again. But this time, we were prepared. I smiled as I activated the resort-wide alert system, watching as neighbors emerged from their cabins, phones in hand, receiving the same notification. Within minutes, a welcoming committee of 15 residents was approaching the corporate vehicle, led by Walter and Harper. This time, Pine Lake would speak with one voice, standing united against those who saw our homes as mere commodities to be acquired and exploited. This time, I murmured to myself as I watched the scene unfold on my security feed, "We have a whole community ready."
You watched it. You felt it. Now share it with someone who loves drama even more than you. That's the QA Stories way.